year is 1992, and the Bat is back. Batman Returns, coming up.
I've been down here too long. It's time for me to ascend.
From the sewers of Gotham, a new villain emerges.
You didn't invite me, so I crashed!
From the rooftops of Gotham, the perfect enemy comes to life.
I am Catwoman. Hear me roar. Yeah.
And the only one who can save this city is a creature of the night.
Hey, stud. I thought we had something together.
We do.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Random Rewatch. This is Mike, and we are in 1992 looking at Batman Returns. Seems like we're doing the early Batman movies in reverse order because we still haven't gotten to 1989's Batman, and I will have a lot to say when we do. But the year came up as 92, and so here we go with Batman Returns. This is the follow-up to Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie starring Michael Keaton. This one, of course, starring Michael Keaton again, but with Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, Christopher Walken, again, Michael Gough and Pat Hingle, who are returning as Alfred Pennyworth and James Gordon, respectively. So Batman 89 was a huge hit, obviously, $411 million. Development began in 1989 on the sequel. Originally, the studio wanted Robin Williams and Danny DeVito to be the Riddler and the Penguin, respectively. They had purchased the sets. This is Warner Brothers in Hollywood, had purchased the sets from Pinewood Studios, where the original Batman was filmed. Burton originally did not want to come back. He was not a big sequel guy. He did not want to, he found no interest in it, really. And he didn't want to direct it, but they probably dumped a boatload of money onto his back lawn, and eventually he was convinced to come back. The movie was originally given to writer Sam Hamm, who had written the original draft for the 1989 Batman, and he was credited in this film with the story credit because he got rewritten a couple of times, but he came up with the original story, and the original story that he was envisioning had Harvey Dent being one of the bad guys. If you remember 1989, Billy D. Williams played Harvey Dent. They wanted to continue his story, get into the whole Two-Face thing. Billy D. Williams says that he was never signed on for another picture. People at Warner Brothers say that he was signed on for another picture. Who really knows? As I said, Warner Brothers originally wanted a Penguin Riddler story. They felt that the duality between the Riddler being kind of off his rocker and the Penguin, who at this point had basically been portrayed as like a gentleman criminal, someone from a wealthy family, a thief in a tuxedo with a monocle and a top hat. So they considered that to be kind of a good combination. The studio also felt that after the Joker, the Penguin was Batman's most prominent villain or prominent adversary, which is probably true. Even if you go to like the 1966 Batman TV series, Penguin was there quite a bit, probably a lot more than the Riddler was, and probably almost as much as the Joker was. And certainly in the comics, Penguin was a pretty common and popular adversary for Batman. The way Hamm was writing it, this was a direct sequel to the 1989 Batman. They were also going to continue the story and the relationship between Bruce and Vicky Vale. And eventually they were, I think, either going to be engaged or they were going to be married. the Penguin was going to be, you know, kind of a bird-themed criminal, and Catwoman was also into the story, but more kind of overtly sexual, and that piece, I guess, kind of carried over into what we wound up with here. In that version of the story, Penguin and Catwoman team up, and similar to this film, they frame Batman, this time for the murder of some prominent citizens in Gotham City as they are searching for some kind of hidden treasure or something. And they wound up at Wayne Manor, and they discover the Batcave, and they figure out together who Batman is. Robin was also supposed to be in this film. The film did take place at Christmas time, as this film does, but there was also a sequence with machine gun toting Santa Clauses, which were eventually removed. Hamm's drafts did not really interest Burton at all, and he continued to work on directing Edward Scissorhands and writing The Nightmare on Elm Street. But eventually the studio, I guess, wound up with a deal with him getting creative control, and that interested in him having final cut and total control over the story. They brought in Dan Waters to rewrite Hamm. Waters was best known probably for writing Heathers, which was a black comedy from the late 80s. So by 1991, the beginning of 1991, Tim Burton was in. Like I said, he had creative control. He didn't really like the original Batman movie. A lot of it was changed or done the way the studio wanted certain things to be done. For instance, with some of the music and with toning down some of the weird Burtonisms. This one, they actually wanted to be a full Tim Burton movie, so they were more than happy to let him do his weirdness. He replaced a bunch of people who had originally been signed on for this film, who had been on the original Batman, brought in his own cinematographer. Stefan Sapsky brought in his production designer, brought in Bo Welch, brought in Stan Winston to do makeup, and basically was working with his team. Waters' script focused very much on the villains, as we'll see in the movie. This is really Penguin and Catwoman's story, and Batman is kind of more just a character in it than really kind of the pushing, the driving force in it. Waters' initial draft was like 160 pages. Warner Brothers was like, no way. So that would have been way too expensive. So he kept toning it down, wound up, I think, doing 5 drafts. Him and Burton were still kind of button heads on a couple of things. So eventually Waters was fired, and Wesley Strick was brought in to finalize the script. He had just finished doing Arachnophobia, Cape Fear, and he was able to kind of tone things down a little bit. A lot of times screenwriting, especially when these script doctors come in, not only are they brought in to kind of make the script flow a little better, but they're also brought in to kind of cheapen the script a little bit to make it more streamlined so that it would be cheaper to film. As far as casting goes, we'll talk about who wound up in the film as we get to their characters. Obviously, Keaton's back as Bruce Wayne and Batman, but there was kind of a lot of kicking around with these characters. Originally, Selena Kyle was scheduled to be Annette Bening. She had actually been signed for the role, but got pregnant and was not able to do it. Ellen Barkin, Cher, Bridget Fonda, Susan Sarandon, Raquel Welch, even Julie Newmar, who had played Catwoman in the 1966 series. All of them were considered. Probably the biggest name or the biggest thing that happened in the casting here was Sean Young basically going off the deep end in trying to get this role. She made her own Catwoman suit, and back up a little bit. She had actually originally been cast as Vicky Vale in the 1989 film, had to drop out due to an injury, and so she was trying to get back in, and she wound up making like her own Catwoman suit, And so the story goes, she was hiding in Tim Burton's office, and he came in and she kind of sprang on him in the Catwoman suit, completely freaked him out. Folks, this is not how you get a role, but this was actually kind of a big thing back then. Entertainment Tonight ran a clip of it, and she went on a couple of talk shows, I think, wearing the costume. This really kind of cost Sean Young not only this role, but probably cost her a lot of credibility in terms of her Hollywood career, which is a shame. I mean, Sean Young, obviously, she's a legend in Blade Runner. She's great in No Way Out. She's great in Stripes. She had a much reduced role in Wall Street. I mean, she was a good actor who did a lot of key parts, and after this whole thing just really basically stopped working, at least in anything serious. As far as the Penguin goes, Tim Burton originally wanted Marlon Brando, but there's no way that Warner Brothers was going to pony up for him. They wanted Dustin Hoffman or Chris Lloyd. Even De Niro was considered. But once the script had evolved to the point where Penguin was actually like a deformed human, then Danny DeVito kind of came to the front. We'll talk about that a little bit later. As I mentioned before, Robin was originally in the screenplay, and that had gone far enough through development before it was cut out that they had actually hired Marlon Wayans to play the role. Like I said, it eventually got cut, but they had done the costumes, they had done sets, they had even made action figures, and he signed a 2-picture deal and wound up getting paid and wound up even getting residuals for the film that he never shot a day in, which is pretty cool. Kind of a Bob Hoskins story, referring to Bob Hoskins casting in The Untouchables as Al Capone, eventually to be replaced. Brian De Palma replaced him with Robert De Niro, but Bob Hoskins got paid in full. And he said it was the easiest money he ever made because he didn't have to do anything for it. Kind of the same thing here with Marlon Wayans. There was also talk about bringing Jack Nicholson back as the Joker. The studio decided that was just going to be way too expensive, so that part of the script was kind of cut out. So this was, unlike Batman, this was filmed in Burbank. At the point that they decided to make this film, the tax benefits of filming in the UK had disappeared, and so it turned out to actually be cheaper to rebuild the sets in California than to use the sets that they had already owned in the UK. As far as the Penguins go, they brought in a whole bunch of actual, Emperor penguins. They spent tons of money in keeping the sets refrigerated for the penguins. There was a combination of live penguins, animatronic penguins, and little people dressed as penguins, including Deep Roy. There was a major redesign of the Batsuit. One of the big problems, obviously, with the first movie was that Keaton could barely move in that heavy Batsuit, so he worked with the costume designers on lightening it and getting it a little more flexible, a little more movement going on there. It still weighed 55 pounds, but at least he could turn his neck a little bit and move it. Keaton also had them put a zipper in it to make it easier to get in and out of it, also so that he could take a bathroom break because he couldn't in the original costume. And they also replaced the boots with Nike Air Jordan 6s with special upper extensions so that they look like boots, but if you pay attention to him, he's wearing Air Jordans throughout the whole thing. So there were 48 Batsuits built, 70 Catwoman suits, and we'll talk about the Penguin and his prosthetics later. Danny Elfman brought back to do the music. He was really ticked off about the fact that Warner Brothers brought in Prince to do some music for the original film. And that was Burton and Elfman were not part of that decision. And so, the Bat Dance and the other needle drops that Prince did for that film were kind of done in the edit after the fact. Elfman was kind of ticked off about that, but Burton talked him into coming back, and he composed the score for this film. A lot of reminiscence of the 89 Batman score with some new cues in it. It's a really great score. So let's get into this film. So this is a, very typical Tim Burton film. It's very kind of surreal. Not as much as the original film, and I've heard it explained that this is like the east side of Gotham City that this film largely takes place in, as opposed to the lower class west side of Gotham City that the original film took place in. It's, a different part of town, but so it's got kind of the same feel, but it's a little more grounded and a little more realistic. It's still very surreal. And so we see this couple who are coming out with a baby stroller, the parents of the Penguin. This is Paul Rubens, Pee-wee himself as the father, and Diane Salinger, who was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, as the mother. Originally, the idea was Burgess Meredith was going to do a cameo and play Oswald's father, but Burgess Meredith got sick and was unable to film. So Tim Burton reached out to his friend Paul Rubens, who came in and did this. By the way, this is post I got arrested in a porno theater in Sarasota, Florida, Paul Rubens. So it was a little scandalous to have him in this. They didn't really make a big deal out of it. We see them drop the baby carriage, or the top of the baby carriage, into the river in the park, which apparently is connected to the Penguin house at the abandoned zoo. We jump forward a little bit, and it's Christmas, it's tree lighting, and Penguin is already a thing in Gotham City. They're talking about the Penguin Man. They're talking about who lives under the city, that type of stuff. So, this is kind of in the middle of the story. People already know about him. And we wind up meeting Max Schreck, who is played by the inimitable Christopher Walken. Walken based his character on, some well-known media moguls, but the styling of the character is supposed to be reminiscent of Vincent Price in a particular movie, but I couldn't figure out which movie it was. So the styling is Vincent Price. The mannerisms are Sam Goldwyn, and this is Chris Walken, who's always great. He obviously runs this department store, and we wind up meeting his assistant stroke secretary, Selena Kyle, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer was an interesting choice for this. She had originally been also up for Vicky Vale when Sean Young dropped out, and Tim Burton had decided then not to hire her because he had a prior relationship with her, and I guess he thought it would be awkward, and I guess also he had gotten over it a couple years later, because they wind up casting her in this. She is, I think, the star of this movie. She is absolutely fantastic in this role. She brings a depth to Selena Kyle that really has not been seen, I think, anywhere else. She's just absolutely great in it.
Of the future, lit up like a blanket of stars, but blinking on and off. Embarrassingly low on juice. Frankly, I cringe, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, any plans you've got will have to go to the usual committees, through the usual channels.
I have a suggestion. Well, actually, really just more like a question.
Afraid we haven't properly housebroken Ms. Kyle. In the plus column, though, she makes a hell of a cup of coffee.
So we get the gang attack on the this tree ceremony, and 13 minutes into the film, we get Batman, finally. And then eventually we see the Penguin, 19 minutes into the film, who is played by Danny DeVito. As I had said before, when they decided that this was going to be like kind of a deformed literally penguin-esque penguin, that DeVito kind of became the front runner in this. He played this thing absolutely amazingly. Stan Winston and his crew designed the makeup and the prosthetics for him, and took him 4 hours a day to get into this stuff. And apparently, when he was doing ADR for this film in post-production, so what that is they will go back and re-record some of the dialogue if there's not a clean take from the set. So, you're out in the set, you have a lot of stuff going on, there's people moving around, there's equipment running, and sometimes you don't really get a really clean take on the dialogue. And so it's very, very, very common for the actors to go into a sound booth, and they do what's called looping, where they basically say the same line over and over and over again. And that gives the editor and the director and the sound mixer multiple takes that they could drop into the film. Sometimes it's really noticeable where the character will have his back turned and you'll hear a voice and it doesn't necessarily sound like it's really in the moment. Sometimes most of the time it's absolutely seamless, and it's a really common thing. Apparently DeVito would make them put the prosthetics on him in order to go into the booth and record the ADR, because it got him more into the character, and he was having a hard time finding Oswald if he wasn't actually wearing the prosthetics. So that is a man who is completely committed to his craft. Danny DeVito is a really interesting guy. One of the things that people don't realize about him is that he is a real powerhouse producer in Hollywood, and he's behind the scenes in way more films than he is actually in. Go look at his IMDb and look at his producing credits. Just to give you an example, Pulp Fiction would have never gotten made if it wasn't for Danny DeVito, because he was the executive in charge of that. He's the one who actually really got that film made, and he did that with a couple of other films, and his producing credits are really, really something else. I mean, Danny DeVito is one of the guys who really walks the walk. But anyway, so Penguin meets up with Max, and there's a lot of really great conversations in this film.
You're a well-respected monster, and I am, to date, not.
Frankly, I feel that's a bum rap. I'm a businessman. Tough, yes. Shrewd, okay. But that does not make me a monster.
Don't embarrass yourself, Max. I know all about you. What you hide, I discover. What you put in your toilet, I place on my mantle. Get the picture?
What is that supposed to hypnotize me?
No, just give you a splitting headache.
Selena Kyle does this. Well, first she does this. She comes home and she's going through this routine, which you get this feeling she goes through all the time. Honey, I'm home. And, but obviously there's nobody there. And she drinks her milk. She feeds the cat. She listens to her answering machine. Her date cancels, her mom. And then she realizes she left herself a message. She forgot something at work. She's got to go back to work. She goes back to work. And Max is there, surprised that she's there. And here's the thing about Selena Kyle. She needs to learn to keep her mouth shut, because she goes through this thing about the power plant and she's just digging herself into a hole.
This is all very interesting, though a bit on the technical side. I mean, about how the power plant is a power plant in name only, and since, in fact, it's going to be a big giant capacitor. And that instead of generating power, it'll sort of be sucking power from Gotham City, storing it, stockpiling it, which is a very novel approach, I'd say.
And who would you say this to?
And so Max, does this great little line, where she's like, I wouldn't, say that to anybody. And she's like, well, who would you tell? And he pushes her back against the window and then like kind of fakes her out, pretends that he was just joking. And she's like, oh, it's not that you could just kill me. And of course he gives this great line. Actually, it's exactly like that.
Okay. Go ahead. Intimidate me. Bully me if it makes you feel big. I mean, it's not like you can just kill me.
Actually, it's a lot like that. Huh? Huh?
For a second there, you really frightened me.
And he pushes her out of the window, and she lands on the ground, and I guess cats licking your fingers or nibbling at your hands are a remedy for falling out of a window. But she's not dead. She gets up and she goes back to her apartment and goes through her whole thing again. Honey, I'm home, but she's obviously not in her right mind, and she goes through this thing of tearing apart her stuffed animals, making her costume, and we are seeing kind of the beginning of Catwoman. So, Max and Penguin kind of hatch this plan where Penguin is going to become a hero and come out of the shadows, so to speak, and he rescues the mayor's baby. And then he gives this little speech about how all he's looking to do is find his mom and dad and figure out who he is. There's a scene in the cemetery where he finds the Cobblepots and he finds that he's Oswald Cobblepot, and he meets the press finally and announces himself to the world. But in the meantime, we kind of cut back over to Selina, who's like, now she's out prowling Gotham and comes across this woman who is, I guess, being attacked by a guy, and she fights him off, but then she blames the woman for being so weak. And you've got the kind of the beginnings of the seeds here of Catwoman and Penguin and their parallel journeys. I want to talk for a minute about kind of the themes that are in this film. It's really interesting. This film, so I probably hadn't seen this film, probably since the late 90s, maybe mid to late 90s. I remember not really liking it all that much. And so it never really was something that I would revisit a lot. This film was a lot deeper than I gave it credit for. And there's a lot of themes in here. One of the big themes in here is this idea of duality. Everybody is two people. You have Bruce and Batman. You have Selina and Catwoman. You have, I would even say you've got Oswald and the Penguin. But you also have this duality of these two both kind of discovering who they are, both Oswald and Selina kind of discovering who they are, and kind of their birth as adversaries for Batman, as criminals, as whatever you want to call it. But there's also obviously a lot of ideas about sexuality, which is not something that, at least, the TV audience of Batman's used to. It wasn't really brought up in the first film, but, Catwoman is obviously a very sexually liberated version of Selina Kyle. There's a lot of really cringy dialogue in this film, especially between Catwoman and Penguin. There's also a lot of misogyny in this film, and I think that's kind of the point of it. There's this idea of Selina Kyle as kind of this feminist, right? That she's coming out and she is, I'm Catwoman, hear me roar. She's got this kind of strong thing going on, but she also blames what she perceives to be the weak women, whether it's this woman here, whether it's the Ice Princess later on, you know, she's kind of misogynistic in her own way against these damselized women in the story. It's just really kind of an interesting journey that the story takes throughout these kind of things. And obviously the big thing is this duality thing and struggling with your alternate versions of yourself, you know, whether it's Bruce or whether it's Selena. And Bruce's solution at one point is like, let's just, you know, take off the mask and run away kind of thing. And it's really deeper than I initially gave it credit for. And there's really a lot going on in this film. Anyway, so Bruce winds up meeting with Max about the power plant thing, and they wind up arguing about it because Bruce is not buying any of Max's BS.
You go 15 rounds with Mohammed Shrek? Well, I guess we're going to find out. Of course, I don't have a crime boss like Cobblepot in my corner, so it might be...
Crime boss.
Shows what you know, mister. To the man born with a silver spoon. Oswald is Gotham's new golden boy. If his parents hadn't 86'd him, you two might have been bunkies at prep school.
Oswald controls the Red Triangle gang. I can't prove it yet, but we both...
Wayne, I'll not stand for mudslinging in this office. If my assistant was here, she already would have escorted you out to...
Anywhere he wants. Preferably some night spot, grotto, or secluded hideaway. Nice suit.
Look, Selena. Selena.
That's my name, Maximilians. Don't wear it out or I'll make you...
Max kind of feigns indignation and gives the old, you know, if my assistant was here, she'd walk you out. And there she is. There's Selena. And so now, of course, Max doesn't really know what to do because she thought she was dead. And she is super confident now because she knows she's got Max over a barrel a bit. We'll skip forward a little bit to Max's plan. And this film is like plans within plans, right? Max's initial plan is not really what Max is trying to do. Oswald's initial plan is not really what Oswald is trying to do. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But plans within plans. And now the next stage of Max's plan is this whole, you know, Max for mayor, you know, Oswald for mayor kind of thing. And he brings him downstairs and they have like the kind of campaign launch party. Oswald's hitting on Jan Hooks and bites the other guy's nose. And meanwhile, you have stuff with the Red Triangle gang and Batman. Bruce is doing some investigation stuff. But like I said, this is not really his movie. This is really Selena and Oswald's movie. Probably the best, I don't know, my favorite 10 minutes of the film, though, is this kind of this whole bit where he's out fighting the Red Triangle gang and Selena is in Shrek's kind of sabotaging the thing. She opens up the gas line and then Bruce and Penguin, or Batman and Penguin, wind up having this conversation on the rooftop about Penguin really going to be able to succeed.
Admiring your handiwork?
Touring the riot scene. Gravely assessing the devastation. Upstanding mayor stuff.
You're not the mayor.
Things change.
What do you want?
Ah, the direct approach. I admire that in a man with a mask. You don't really think you'll win, do you?
Things change.
And then we see Selena coming, Catwoman coming and doing her flips across the street. And she presents herself to Batman and Penguin. I just watch DeVito like eyeing her as she's standing there.
Meow.
Then Selena winds up having a fight with Bruce. But it's weird. It's this kind of weird, flirty fight. She does the whole, you know, I can't believe you hit me, I'm a woman thing. And he goes to apologize and then she attacks him and she does the whole thing where she's like kind of feeling around his armor and she finds him and she sticks him.
Who are you?
Who's the man behind the bat? Maybe you can help me find the woman behind the cat. No, that's not you. Ah, there you are.
There's the scene with Penguin and Catwoman where she's in his apartment, and Vincent Schiavelli, who is just great whenever he's in anything, he's like, "You have company," and he goes over and he is hitting on her hard, and it's not even innuendo or double entendres. They are just, it's really some cringy dialogue between these two, but they wind up, I guess, kind of coming to a pact and making this decision that the best thing to do is not to make Batman a martyr, but to basically make him a criminal so that Gotham City will turn on him. So there's a sequence here where Selina takes the canary out of the cage and puts it in her mouth, and this actually happened. She actually trained to put this bird into her mouth and hold it in there for a few seconds because Tim Burton wanted a shot of the canary coming out of her mouth. And it's a great shot. I will give him that. So then Bruce and Selina are on a date. She comes over to Wayne Manor, and they're just kind of hanging out on the couch and having this kind of conversation. And they're both trying to say things, but not say things overtly. You get the feeling like he wants to tell her that he's Batman, that she wants to tell him that she's Catwoman. How they don't recognize each other at this point, I really have no idea. There's this interesting conversation about crazy people and normal people and what her take on it is.
Well, was Vicky right about your difficulty with duality?
See, if I say yes, then, you're going to think of me as a Norman Bates, Ted Bundy type, and well, you might not let me kiss you.
It's the so-called normal guys who always let you down. Sickos never scare me. At least they're committed.
But then she winds up touching him where she had stabbed him. He winds up moving her shirt so that the scar from their fight is exposed on her arm. And they both kind of freak out a little bit. And then they both get Alfred to make excuses for the other one. And that's kind of funny. But in the meantime, there's stuff going on and they both need to leave. And so you see this other kind of sequence of him getting into costume, with all his equipment and multiple costumes and the elevator and everything's laid out for him versus her driving down the country road in her Volkswagen Beetle, trying to pull her costume on. The Red Triangle Gang manages to break into the Batmobile and start to do some sabotage to it. Originally, the idea here was that they were going to turn it into like an H-bomb or something because I guess it has atomic batteries, and that was just deemed to be a little too much. So they did the remote control thing. By the way, that's Doug Jones, who is putting the remote control gizmo on it. Doug Jones will go on to be well known as Abe Sapien in the Hellboy movies, as the Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth. Just anywhere you needed kind of a weirdly gangly guy because he's got a very unusual body shape. And then, of course, most recently, he was well known for being Saru in Star Trek Discovery. The dog, by the way, the Quiet Woman's dog that you see, this is the little white Bichon Frise who is running around and breaks a bomb into one of the stores at one point. This is a fairly famous dog. She was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. She was Cleo McDowell's dog in Coming to America. And she was probably most known as Precious from The Silence of the Lambs. So this is Precious, who is blowing up this shop. So we have the Ice Princess who is captive on the roof. Catwoman comes and lets her go, cuts her loose, but she's standing on the edge. Penguin comes out from the shadows and throws a lawn dart at her, which has got bats in it, and she falls off the roof, lands conveniently on the switch for the Christmas tree, which lights up the tree and releases a whole bunch of other bats. Catwoman and Batman start to have another fight. And this is where we get the first iteration of the mistletoe line.
You're catnip to a girl like me. Handsome, dazed, and to die for.
Mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it.
But a kiss can be even deadlier if you mean it.
And then there's this weird, it's not really a kiss, it's more of a lick. But I guess that makes sense because she's a cat. Batman has this really awkward looking wingsuit. I will say it's cool though. He stands up there and holds his arms out and the thing unfolds. But, you know, kind of like Selina can't keep her mouth shut, Bruce kind of got to get out of Dodge there, man. Not, you know, everybody's kind of suspicious that you are responsible for tossing the Ice Queen off the building. And then there's all these bats, and instead of like getting out of Dodge, you're just like flying around the whole area. Beat it. Then we have this other kind of awkward scene where Penguin proposes to Catwoman.
So what are we waiting for? Let's consummate our fiendish union.
What are you talking about?
Oh, come on. Can't you picture? It's dark in the mayor's mansion. I'm bushed. So here you come into the bedroom, twitching your little tail. My slippers in one hand, a dry martini in the other.
Oh, please. I wouldn't touch you to scratch you.
You lousy minx! I ought to have you spayed! You sent out all the signals! And I don't think I like you anymore!
Obviously, that's not going anywhere, Oz. And then you have the pretty cool remote Batmobile scene. One of the funny things about this that really kind of dates it is that Batman goes and pulls a recordable CD and puts it in the car. That was in 1992. That was like Bruce Wayne's living in the future. Recordable CD, which he, you know, records Oswald's Heart from Hell speech.
I know you're all concerned. Hey, just relax. I'll take care of the squealing, wretched, pinhead puppets of Gotham. I didn't say that. You gotta admit, I played this stinking city like a harp from hell.
So that he can play it back later. And then we have the whole masquerade ball, which is going on. Interesting thing here, back to that theme on duality, which is where everybody in this ball is wearing a mask except for Bruce and Selina. Right? It's almost as if Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle are their costumes because they're really Batman and Catwoman. It's kind of an interesting way to frame that. But they wind up having this dance, and she spies the mistletoe. They come to, you know, they both kind of repeat themselves from the fight on the roof, and they come to realize who each one is.
A kiss under the mistletoe. You know, mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it.
A kiss can be even deadly.
Oh my God. Does this mean we have to start fighting?
Let's go outside.
And Bruce is not, he's not fazed by it. He's like, look, let's just go. take the mask off. Let's run away. Let's go. Let's get out of here. I think at this point he's kind of tired of it, and he sees in her, I think, the problems that he has with Batman. And like I said, this is deeper than I really had given it credit for. This is really a great character study on these two characters and on, what this dual life that they're leading is doing to them and how it's tearing them apart. But we're back with the Penguin, and the Penguin reveals what his evil plan is, that he's going to kidnap the babies of all the wealthy people in Gotham and put them in a pond of toxic waste from Shrek's factories.
Great speech, Oswald.
My name is not Oswald. It's Penguin. I am not a human being. I am an animal. Cold-blooded. Crank the AC. Where are my lists? Bring me the names. It's time. These are the names of the firstborn sons of Gotham City. Just like I was. And like me, a terrible fate waits for them. Tonight, while their parents party, they'll be dreaming away in their safe cribs, their soft beds, and we will snatch them, carry them into the sewer, and toss them into a deep, dark water.
There's the baby train. There's kind of the penguins all marching with their little remote targeting systems on there. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on. There's the duck car chase, and I think it's great that Bruce in the Batmobile has like the icon on the screen is a duck. There's just all kinds of weird stuff going on here. Winds up in the abandoned zoo, and Max is there, and Batman saves Max, and then Selina comes along, and Batman, Bruce is trying to save her from whatever she's putting herself through, and he winds up revealing himself, and she winds up revealing herself to Max, and now there's this sequence where Max shoots Selina, and she's like, "Oh, you tried to kill me, and Penguin tried to kill me, Batman tried to kill me. I still have lives left."
Selina Kyle. You're fired. And Bruce Wayne, why are you dressed up like Batman?
Because he is Batman, you moron.
Was.
You killed me. The Penguin killed me. Batman killed me. That's 3 lives down. You got enough in there to finish me off?
One way to find out.
4, 5. Still alive! 6, 7. All good girls go to heaven. 2 lives left. I think I'll save one for next Christmas.
So she winds up killing Max with the stun gun that she had originally gotten, and at the beginning of the movie, and electrocuting Max and disappearing in a cloud of smoke. There's the Penguin funeral. Penguin comes up out of the water, but he eventually winds up dying.
He's getting some air. I'll murder you momentarily. And but first, I need a cool drink of ice water.
And there's this weird penguin funeral thing. Watch closely. I don't think the birds ever touch him. They just walk next to him and he starts moving. And then at the very end, we see, the bat signal. I guess Commissioner Gordon is back counting on Batman. And then we see that Selina's still alive. And that's the end of the movie. So what do we wind up with? So this was released June 16th, 1992. There was a lot of competition this year. Hollywood had had a couple of bad years, and they were pulling a lot of big guns out here. Patriot Games had upped its marketing so it could compete with Batman. Everybody was planning on this being a big movie. A lot of studios had moved their projects off of this weekend or out of June in order not to compete with this film. Patriot Games, League of Their Own, Aliens 3, Sister Act, just to name a few of them. This film wound up having a $45 million opening weekend, which at the time was the highest grossing opening weekend ever. It had an $80 million budget and wound up doing $266 million total worldwide. So it was a big, big hit. It was one of the highest grossing films of all time when it came out. Got an 82 on Rotten Tomatoes, 68 on Metacritic. It's got a B on CinemaScore. A lot of people didn't know what to make out of this film. There's a lot of criticism about kind of how uneven the plot was and that there was a lot of moving pieces going on here. A lot of people didn't really like the kind of overt sexuality and weirdness that Selina and Penguin were doing. Other people really kind of praised it for the depth of the script and how well it carried all of these themes that we had talked about. Roger Ebert, 2 stars. Didn't really like it all that much. He wrote, the plot doesn't exactly unwind like a well-coiled machine. The movie proceeds in fits and starts from one little drama to another as the Penguin ventures out from his subterranean haunts, and a newspaper circulation war leads to scare stories about his alleged crimes. He goes on, I always thought it would be fun to be Batman. The movie believes it's more of a curse. Batman is not a crime-fighting superhero, but a reclusive neurotic who feels he has to prove himself to a society he does not really inhabit. And I agree with you, Roger. That is exactly what this movie is trying to say, that it's not cool, it's not fun to be Batman. Bruce seems to be trying to get out of the whole Batman gig through most of this film. Tim Burton wound up getting out of the Batman gig after this film. Warner Brothers, we talked about this when we did Batman and Robin, I think. You know, Warner Brothers thought this film was a little dark, a little scary. They wanted to go in a direction that was kind of a little more family friendly and a little more campy. And so we wound up with the Joel Schumacher Batman verse. And the less that is said about that, the better. But that is it for Batman Returns. Mike gives it, 4 stars, man. This is a much, much better movie than I thought it was going to be in my memory. And I really wound up enjoying. I've watched it twice in the past 2 weeks. I really wound up finding that there's a lot going on in this film. So I would sit down actually like as a double feature and just watch Batman and Batman Returns. I think these 2 movies go really, really well together. And I really think that that's really a big piece of Batman lore in here. By the way, a little, just as an added note, if you listen to the main show, the Movie Punditry show, I've got a fly in the ointment about these people who say that Batman doesn't kill. Batman really literally lights a guy on fire in this movie. So that was never a thing. It was never supposed to be a thing. And it's definitely not a thing. So there you have it. Thanks a lot. Next episode, we're going to be taking kind of a turn into reality and we're not doing a comic book movie. And I think you're going to like what's coming up. But for now, that's it. And peace out.